Good morning. I hesitate to say, another gorgeous day in paradise, because I realize a lot of you in the northern hemisphere are suffering from really horrible weather at the moment. So my commiserations. Today we're going to investigate firescale, and it's not really our enemy. It's something that is just around. It's been around forever, and you either have to learn how to keep it from happening or how to cover it up. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to get to know our enemy. When you buy your sterling from your supplier, it won't have firescale. From the very first time you apply heat to this, if you don't have the surface protected from oxygen, you will have firescale. So the very first time you anneal a piece, basically you're creating firescale because of the copper. Copper always comes to the surface. That's our 7.5%. So the only way to keep from getting firescale is to always protect your piece from the oxygen, and the only way you can do that is to either work in a vacuum, which I don't know how you do that, or you create a mixture of methylated spirits and boric acid to coat your piece. So I'll show you how to do that. But Tom Nelson, I think it's Tom, from Rio Grande, has a video on doing this. Now, we don't normally teach our first-year students to do this, because you could imagine 18 to 21 people with a volatile mixture on their workbench. It would be bedlam. It would be a disaster. So normally it's second year before the kids get taught about this. So they just have to suffer firescale. Now you need a container, preferably glass, and you need one with a good sealing top. Now this is nice, but it isn't a perfect vacuum seal. And because this is so volatile, the methylated spirits, it will evaporate. So what I suggest is something like this. This is glass with a Tupperware type top that has a really good seal. Now, I recommend round, because if you have square, which is nice, and the bloody thing catches a light, it's more difficult to put a square top on. So with a round top, it's quite easy to just pick up the top. So first thing you do is get boric acid. You can get it from your jewelry supply places, or if you can't get to a jewelry supply place, you can go to the chemist, drugstore, whatever you call it. It's where you get your headache tablets. And this is boracic acid, but it's actually boric acid, same thing. You don't have to have a prescription to get this. I don't know what they use it for, but I think pickling. So our mixture is really simple. It's just methylated spirits and boric acid until it won't take anymore. So what you want is a lot of boric acid. And we'll stir that up. And what you want is a mixture that's thick enough that when you dip your piece in it, it will come out completely coated with a fine white powder. Now here you say, well, my flux is borax, boric acid, and water. Well, what you can see, because it's water, it always pulls back, so you'll have gaps. In each place there's a gap, you'll have fire scale. Yeah, it's almost impossible to get a good coat because it's a water base and there's a slight amount of oil in the middle. And when you dip your piece in the boric acid, you can see that because it's alcohol base, the oil doesn't bother it. Yeah. So now what you need to do is set this alight. Pretty green flame. And once the alcohol burns off, you have this nice white powder completely covering your piece. So now you can anneal or solder, and you won't have fire scale on this piece. Always cover this when you're not using it, because guaranteed you'll set it alight. Now, if you do accidentally set it alight, it's not a drama. Be calm. Pick up the lid. Do not rush. And cover it up. Flames out, no big deal. If you accidentally knock that over while it's burning, big trouble, because it's an alcohol flame and it just goes everywhere. So don't set your bench alight. Always cover this when you're not using it. And like I say, if it does catch fire, be calm. The last thing you want to do is rush when you're trying to put out a fire, because then it turns into a huge drama. So now you can see my two pieces of metal, the one with the boric acid and methyl, and the one with the regular flux. Now, the boric acid works well to protect the metal, but it doesn't work that good as a soldering flux. So what you want to do is, where you're going to solder, use your regular flux with the solder. So I'll bring this up. I'll move in a little closer. I've got a little piece of hard solder in the middle here, so we'll just warm it up. And you can watch what's happening. So this bit on the left melted quicker than your normal flux, and that's good because that protects the surface of the metal. And you can see how the piece on the right is starting to turn dark. So I'm just circling this bit of solder. Okay, the solder flowed. It didn't flow into my joint, but it will show you what's happening with the metal. So you can see the metal on the left has been protected by our coating, where the metal on the right has gone dark in places where there isn't flux. So basically that's it. At this point, well, I'd put another piece of solder on there and solder it. But you have to always protect your metal. You always have to keep the oxygen away from the surface. If you don't, and you don't want the fire scale visible, what you have to do is you have to sand and then polish until there's no fire scale. But if you have a piece with a lot of texture on it, you'll lose your texture. So that's the point where we do what they call bring up the silver. We heat, pickle, rinse, heat, pickle, rinse for 5 times. We have a fine silver coating on the piece. We tumble it. You can't polish it on a wheel because you'll polish off that fine silver surface and you'll have your fire scale underneath. Anyway, tip of the day. So I'm just going to polish the piece with the solder on it a little bit, triply, and I'll wipe this off so we can see what it looks like. Now, when you're playing with fire scale, so you can see where the flux ran down and the metal's nice and clear, and there's a slight purple stain here. If you put it against a piece of white material, it reflects and it's always obvious. So when you're working on your piece, from time to time, put it on a piece of white paper and just look at it, and you can tell whether you have fire scale or not. So now I'm going to take the piece that had the boric acid on it and polish it a little bit, and we'll see if there's any fire scale on it. So there are the 2 pieces. This is the one that they didn't solder together, but they came up to the same temperature. So other than the spots that haven't come off on the pickle yet, you can see there's no fire scale on this one, and there is on this one. So that's the tip of the day. Always protect your metal, or be prepared to deal with the fire scale. Now, Tim McCrate has a lot of different formulas in his book, The Complete Metalsmith, and he doesn't necessarily talk so much about fire scale, although he does cover it, but he gives you at least 3 different formulas of protective barriers that you can use.